Hey, how's it going, guys? Mr. Boss for the win here, and in today's GTA 5 video, we're going to be talking about what are the best and the fastest unreleased vehicles. So when I'm making this video from the Super San Andreas Autosports update, there hasn't been any new unreleased vehicles come out. We know there's 11 total in the files, 10 land vehicles, 1 helicopter being the Sea Sparrow. So today, we're going to be talking about those 10 land vehicles, which ones are the fastest, and which ones are going to perform the best. Now, before we get into any of the results today, we need to talk about some of the values of the cars. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is off-road traction loss values. So 1 is the default value. So any less means that the vehicle will handle better off-road. Now there's 5 of the unreleased vehicles that have a value below 1. So let's talk about those right now. You can see here the Caracara has one of 0.15, which means it is really great off-road. So that actually might be something amazing about the Caracara, is it's got amazing off-road potential. You have the Flash GT sitting at 0.35. You have the GB200 sitting at 0.375, and the Issy Classic sitting at 0.3. So all of those are very similar. What I think is pretty crazy is that the Issy Classic performs just as well off-road as 2 of the rally sports cars, the GB200 and the Flash GT. So pretty cool stuff right there. And then by far the worst of them is the Michelli, and that is at 0.6. But you would expect that from a Lampadati Sports Classic vehicle. So those are the off-road traction loss values. Let's talk about the downforce values now. So the higher the downforce value, the better traction the vehicle is going to have. So let's take a look at some of these right here. You can see the Entity 2, which has already been released. That's the XXR, has a 1.75. The Flash GT has a downforce value of 2.0. GB200 1.5. The Tesseract, which is one of the new supercars, 1.7. The Taipan, which we've already seen come out, has the lowest at 1.2. But by far the most significant is the Tyrant at 3.0. That is insane. That supercar has a ton of downforce, which is obviously something that you want in supercars. Now, we'll talk about what that means a little bit later on, but I still think that is pretty awesome. Moving on, let's talk about the vehicle drivetrains, whether they're all-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, or front-wheel drive. So the first vehicle is the Caracara, which is all-wheel drive with 70% being at the rear, 30% being in the front. You have the Dominator 3, which is the Dominator GTX. That is actually rear-wheel drive, 100%. You have the Cherubic, which is rear-wheel drive too. The Ellie, which is rear-wheel drive also. After that, we have the Flash GT, which is all-wheel drive, 80% being at the rear, 20% being at the front. After that, you have the Issy Classic, which is forward-wheel drive or front-wheel drive for 100% at the front. The Jester, 100% RWD. The Michelli, 100% rear as well. Sea Sparrow is rear-wheel drive too, even though it's an aircraft, so that doesn't really make sense. Tesseract is all-wheel drive, 70% being at the rear, 30% at the front. And the Tyrant is 100% rear-wheel drive. And now let's talk about the engine resistance value. This is one of the new stats that Rockstar has added into the game. Basically, the lower the value, the less resistance and the faster acceleration. The higher the value, the more resistance and the slower acceleration. So the Caracara has a 0.015, which is not terrible, but even a little bit will cause these vehicles to slow down. The Cherubic, 0.01, same with the Dominator and Ellie, 0.01. The Flash GT has the exact same amount as well, 0.01. The Issy Classic, Jester, and Michelli don't have any, which I guess is cool. And then the Tesseract, 0.02, Tyrant, 0.02 as well. I know those stats are a little awkward and hard to understand at times, but that's a new stat that Rockstar has added for these vehicles in the game. Now, let's talk about the performance and the speed of these unreleased vehicles. So for this video, I'm going to be using the information gathered by a user Oleg, aka DJ Meg. So I'll leave his 2 testing videos in the description. Essentially what he's done is he's taken the unreleased cars and I think he's put them around Bruffy's testing track. Now, I'm not sure if these 2 guys are working together. They might be friends. I have no idea. But that's the source that I'm using for this video. So I'll leave both of those in the description. So what he's done is he's taking the unreleased vehicles around the test track and comparing them to the times that Broughy has already gathered for the fastest vehicle of that class. I know that's a little bit confusing at first, but as we start to get into it, it will make more sense. All right, so I'm gonna go in order of the vehicles he's tested in the video. That way, if you pull up his video testing, you can kind of follow along as well. So the first vehicle he tested was the Dominator GTX, which is obviously competing in the muscle class. Now, the fastest muscle class vehicle we have right now is the Yosemite with a time of 1 minute, 6 seconds, 0.7. And the Dominator GTX didn't get a terrible time. It actually finished with a 1 minute, 9.8. Although, like I said, it still isn't all that competitive. 3 seconds in the muscle class is actually a pretty big difference. And when you compare the fact that the Yosemite and the regular Dominator and the Sabre Turbo are all closer than that, it's still not going to be one of like the best muscle cars that you can have. So again, it's over 3 seconds slower. Staying in the muscles class, we have the Vapid Ellie. Now, right off the bat, I could tell you that this was not going to be a good performing car. The fact that it doesn't have a spoiler upgrade doesn't help either. And the Vapid Ellie was one of those cars that definitely really struggled. It finished with a 1 minute 14.6. Compare that to the Yosemite's 1 minute 06. That's almost a 10-second difference. So a lot of people are going to be buying the Vapid Ellie because of the Dominator Classic, because of the pop culture reference in movies and TV shows. But this is not a vehicle that you're going to want to use in muscle races. I'm sorry. The Vapid Ellie is just completely outclassed by a lot of the other vehicles. Now, let's move on to the sports car category. And we're going to start with the Flash GT. Now, this one's going to be kind of tricky because the Pariah is just a world-class car, and it has a time of 1 minute 0.8. So it's going to be hard to compare the sports vehicles. And the Flash GT isn't terrible. It just can't really compete with the Pariah. It finished with a time of 1 minute 6.9. So just about 6 or 7 seconds slower, which is a lot. But keep in mind, the Pariah is competing at like supercar levels. So I think this is still going to be more of like a rally sports car, less of like a racing one. And don't get me wrong, I really enjoy the Flash GT, but man, it still being 6 or 7 seconds behind the Pariah is insane. Now after that, we have the supercars, and the best supercar now is the Wagner, pulling in a time of 59.19 seconds. So let's start with the Tesseract. And the Tesseract is pretty competitive as it finishes with a time of 1 minute and 1 second, 0.2. So roughly about maybe 2.5 seconds slower than the Wagner, which is not bad. Remember, this is an electric supercar, so this thing accelerates incredibly fast, which is obviously very cool. But at the end of the day, it's still 2 seconds slower than a car that's, half the price, basically. So that's something you're going to have to keep in mind as well. After that, we have the Tyrant. The Tyrant is that vehicle with the crazy downforce value, and it actually does really well. I'm telling you, that downforce value is insane. So it has a time of 1 minute 1.13, which again, really, really close to the Wagner, still more expensive, but at least it's really competitive. So even though these cars aren't better than the Wagner, they're still getting pretty decent times, and I think are going to be competitive supercars. Now, let's move into off-road sports classics and compacts. We're going to be starting with the Caracara, which obviously competes in off-road. The best off-road vehicle is the Camacho with a 1 minute 5.58. So the Vapid Caracara, not great, finishing with a time of 1 minute 13.28. It's really just not competitive, and Rockstar probably made it for the target adversary mode or target assault races anyways. Let's move on to sports classics. Now, the best sports classic is the Turismo Classic with a 1 minute 4.59. And the Cherubic, as you expected, does not really come to that level at all. Its time is way worse than that, coming in at 1 minute 16.1, like 12 seconds slower. So you're not going to be using that vehicle for races. After that, you have the wasted opportunity that is the Jester Classic. And the Jester Classic, in my opinion, I don't even think should be in the Sports Classic, but it is really not all that competitive with the Turismo Classic. It comes in at a 1 minute 6.7, so a little over 2 seconds slower, but again, there's a pretty big difference in the sports classic category. After that, you have the Michelin GT, which is also competing in the sports classic category. And the Michelin GT, not competitive either. It has a 1 minute 13.28. And then the final vehicle we're going to be looking at today is the Issi Classic, which is competing against the Brioso RA with a 1 minute 11.272. And unfortunately, the Weenie Issi Classic is not competitive either. Its lap time is 1 minute 18.5. So over 7 seconds slower. So once again, if you want to look at that information in a little bit more depth and detail, I will leave a link to both those videos in the description. And probably the thing that's so frustrating about what Rockstar has done with these vehicles is they would probably all be way better if they had just not introduced the new handling flags. The Tyrant would probably destroy the Wagner. The Tesseract would definitely place in the top 10. The Dominator GTX would likely be the best of the muscle cars. The Flash GT would probably be on par with the LG RH8. And the Jester Classic could potentially beat the Turismo Classic. But with these new handling flags that Rockstar have added into the game, it really just destroys these vehicles, making them a lot worse than they actually are. So once again, the times that I've read off for you guys in this video are all going to be based off of the current handling flags. I still believe there's a chance that later on down the road, Rockstar will end up patching or fixing or completely removing those handling flags altogether, and that will obviously have an impact on all of the new vehicles that they added into the game. So anyways, for now, that is the best performing, quickest, and fastest unreleased cars in Grand Theft Auto Online that are going to be coming out over the next couple weeks and months as a part of the Southern San Andreas Super Sport Series DLC. Let me know in the comments down below which vehicle is your favorite and which one you are most looking forward to, though. I'd love to hear from you guys down there. If you did go on to enjoy this video, though, a like rating would, of course, be awesome. And also, subscribe to my YouTube channel if you are new. We like daily GTA 5 videos like this. With all the way, guys, like I said, thanks so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.